A lot to unpack from that press conference that included local, state, and federal authorities. I'm Rekha Mutteraj along with Trace and Bragg, and we continue our coverage of that New Year's Eve tragedy, New Year's Day tragedy rather. It happened early this morning in New Orleans, and the mass casualty incident being called an intentional attack. It has been confirmed there are local connections here to the Houston area.
Yeah, this as 10 people are dead in what federal law enforcement is now investigating as an act of terrorism. Again, at least 10 people are dead, and that number could rise. Also, 35 people are injured after a truck plowed into a crowd on Bourbon Street around 3:15 this morning.
Investigators also confirming that the suspect is dead. Authorities saying the vehicle that was used was rented from a person who lives locally in Pasadena. Now, in the last 45 minutes, the FBI also confirming the suspect, that person's name, Shamsuddin Jabbar, who is from Texas. The feds say the truck used in the attack was rented through Turo. It's a car rental service, a lot like Airbnb, but for vehicles.
They also confirmed an ISIS flag was attached to the back of the vehicle. ISIS is identified by the U.S. as a terrorist organization, and the FBI is working to determine the suspect's connection to them, if any. Because this is being investigated as a terror attack, the FBI has taken the lead on this investigation. And we have Troy Kless out in Pasadena, where investigators say the rental truck came from. Troy, what are you learning?
Well, Trayson, thank you. Yeah, so we are working on information after discovering some information about the vehicle that was used in the attack. I did contact the owner of the vehicle, and he told me that all he would say is that that the vehicle was rented through the Turo app, but didn't want to provide any other details. So we reached out to Turo themselves to ask some more specific questions about when it was rented and also where it was picked up. So we are still waiting to get that information right now. I did also reach out to the Pasadena Police Department to ask what their involvement is in the investigation, and we are still waiting to hear back. And as you just heard, that there are many agencies that are working around the clock to investigate this attack, and we did speak briefly with the FBI Houston on the phone this afternoon to see if they're involved as well, and they said that they deferred all questions to the FBI New Orleans office as they are the ones that are leading this investigation. So obviously still many questions that we are here working to get answers for at the moment. But again, spoke with the owner of that truck that was used, and all he would say is that yes, the truck was rented through the Turo app, and we're still waiting to get more information, and we will provide it to you once we learn more.
Yeah, there's just so much developing right now, so much we still need to learn. Troy, thank you. All right, let's take a live look at the French Quarter now with this camera that you're going to see in a few seconds. Here you see it now, courtesy of EarthCam. There have been, obviously you see there, a presence of law enforcement walking around the area. As we heard in the news conference, the French Quarter is now a crime scene.
Yeah, they're asking folks to stay out of there. Obviously, a lot of people visiting ahead of the Sugar Bowl that was set to take place tonight, now delayed until tomorrow, but asking folks to stay out of the French Quarter as this investigation continues. And now we want to bring in global counterterrorism expert and former FBI agent Jim Conway. Jim, thank you so much for joining us. Our first question for you, what are the indicators or the factors that led the FBI to take over this investigation, and now what does it mean that it's being investigated as an act of terror?
Well, obviously the presence of an ISIS flag and the links overseas. Look, under federal law, once there is an appearance of international terrorism, by law, the FBI is responsible for the investigation. It's not like the FBI shows up on the scene and says, "Get out of the way, local police, we're in charge now." It's the responsibility of the FBI under federal law to investigate acts of international terrorism, as well as domestic terrorism too, that has a nexus to different parts of the United States. It's their responsibility. So, and just a comment, our reporter on the street said something to the effect of, is the Houston division involved? I can tell you right now, front and center, every FBI office, all 56 field divisions, as well as all of the 70 legal attachés around the world, are front and center and engaged in this. public safety is first and foremost. There's a Sugar Bowl, which I think it was prudent to push that up a day. It's going to be held tomorrow. Obviously, the big public safety issue right now is this act of terrorism in this individual, Din Shabar. Is he part of a larger plot? Are there cohorts working with him? The fact that he had IEDs, the fact that he had collected intelligence, the fact that he had an automatic weapon shows that there could be similar support or support cells linked to him, and that there could be follow-on attacks. So that's what the public safety issue that the FBI and law enforcement is really focused on right now, front and center, the next 24 hours.
And Jim, what was confirmed during the press conference was that the suspect did not act alone. Authorities were asking people who may have had contact with the suspect in the last 72 hours to contact them. What will investigators look into now to determine if he did, in fact, act with others?
Well, it will take place personally, who he was in contact with. They will drill down in cyberspace. They will scrub his cell phone, and they will analyze every single contact. They will scrub social media. They will scrub ISIS chat rooms. This will be a global investigation trying to connect the dots between who he is and who he may be associated with, and if there are support cells around him or acts of terrorism are planned in other parts of the United States. Look, ISIS, in the U.S., it's been quiet. We kind of think, we sort of forget that the caliphate maybe has gone away, but the reality is ISIS is up and running throughout the world, in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East. Over Christmas, there were ISIS attacks against Christian targets over the Christmas holiday in West Africa. Could this have been retaliatory? The U.S. and the French have conducted strikes on ISIS targets in Syria just over the past week. So this is something that we have to be mindful of. ISIS has not gone away. It's something that's not front and center in our news, but it is around the world, particularly in Afghanistan too, with ISIS-K, ISIS Khorasan. So law enforcement is going to drill down over the next 24, 72 hours on any and all contacts that he may have to try to determine if there is a continued threat to public safety.
So obviously a lot of investigation into the suspect's digital footprint. I want to jump now, because you mentioned this, on December 20th at a Christmas market in Germany. There was an attack done very much in the same way, a vehicle ramming into a crowd. 5 people killed, about 200 people injured. So does that attack and the attack in New Orleans highlight the importance of barriers outside major venues and on really busy streets? We heard a lot from law enforcement about steel bollards and how they've been placed, but we just heard moments ago during that press conference that the attacker managed to get around those security measures. So what does that mean as far as security measures moving forward?
Well, look, we look at the modus operandi of both Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and vehicle attacks have been part of their pattern and their trends of attacks. We saw it in Nice, we saw it in Brussels, we saw it in London, on the London Bridge a few years ago. This is part of their modus operandi. So law enforcement, being mindful of that, is always going to look at that as a potential avenue of terrorism. And I think that in New Orleans, it appears as though there was a perimeter in place. As was mentioned during the press conference, this individual was able to obviate the street blockage and go up on the sidewalk. So it's a constant battle, but using vehicles is a part of ISIS's method of attack. We saw it in Nice, we saw it with Charlie Hebdo, we saw it in Brussels at the airport attack. So yes.
And Jim, you mentioned the Sugar Bowl, which is now happening tomorrow. Will the FBI have a role in determining what kind of security measures will be put in place for that game?
Absolutely, and that will fall out of the global investigation that will take place over the next 24 hours before the game. And anything that comes up on the radar screen with respect to a potential threat will go into the plans for security surrounding that Super Bowl. I can tell you right now that security is going to be significantly hardened for this event in New Orleans. And I think it was prudent, as I said earlier, to postpone the game 24 hours until law enforcement and the intelligence community has a chance to drill down and connect the dots over the next 24 hours.
Jim, looking ahead, the Super Bowl also in New Orleans on February 9th, and before that, the presidential inauguration on January 20th in Washington, D.C. I'm guessing that, what does this mean for the level of security? I feel like there's so many major events coming up. It looks like law enforcement and others have to work quickly to get things up to par.
Well, you're absolutely right. But on the upside, I will say that the FBI and its law enforcement partners in the intelligence community do this all day, every day around the world as well. In the United States, we have political conventions, we have Super Bowls, we have World Series, we have numerous events. The Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, where millions visit every year. Law enforcement has task forces in place years in advance, or a year in advance, for the preparation of each one of these special events. So I'm fairly confident that all that can be done is being done. But nonetheless, we don't live in a perfect world, and the bad guys, it's a cat and mouse game. The bad guys are always looking to be able to penetrate those security perimeters, and things are getting more sophisticated today with drones and other methods of attack. So it's an ongoing challenge for law enforcement. But I think the men and women of law enforcement, all agencies, come together to provide a protective ring around each and every one of these events.
Jim, authorities just mentioned in the 1 o'clock news conference that they do not believe the suspect was solely responsible. They're asking for the public's help, anyone who's had contact with the suspect in the last 72 hours, to contact authorities. We did hear that the FBI confirmed that the suspect had an ISIS flag on him. CBS News has been reporting that neither ISIS nor any other foreign terror organization has claimed responsibility for this attack. They're still trying to, as you mentioned, connect the dots and see if the suspect had any direct connection to ISIS.
Sure.
But is it possible that the suspect may have just been inspired by ISIS to commit this attack?
Absolutely. What falls into the category of what we call a lone wolf. He's inspired. And with cyberspace and the chat rooms and the amount of propaganda that's online today, we're seeing that throughout the world. The London attacks were conducted by lone wolves who were not directly mandated to carry out the attack by ISIS in the Middle East, but they were inspired through propaganda, through websites, to conduct this attack. So that may be the case. I think law enforcement will sort that out within the next 24 to 48 hours. We'll sort out if there was a direct link, or was he, as you described, purely inspired by ISIS.
To follow that up, though, does it make it harder to track people who are acting as a lone wolf just because they don't have a direct connection to these organizations? Is it harder for authorities to seek these people out?
Absolutely. It's extremely difficult. It's a very hard target. How can you scan all cyber activity and propaganda and determine who is being inspired, particularly today with end-to-end encryption? We found with the London bombers, Scotland Yard was asked, how the heck did you not know about these guys? It was very simple. At that time, they were using WhatsApp platform, and it was end-to-end encrypted. And throughout their planning stage and throughout their operational stage, they used simple apps that are on everybody's smartphone with end-to-end encryption. It's extremely difficult. This is becoming a harder and harder target for law enforcement, and that's really why law enforcement constantly reaches out into the community and tries to create those bridges and create good and more improvised sources of intelligence to try to get out in front of these things.
Jim Conway, thank you so much for your time. We always appreciate your insight. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Reka.
All right, we have headed to New Orleans right now. Reporter Matt Doherty and photojournalist Ryan Phillips join us now. Matt, you've been making calls to your sources all morning long. What are you learning?
I'll tell you where we are right now. So we just took the exit. We're about 4 minutes from our first stop where we're going to make today, and that's going to be in the St. Roch neighborhood, which is a few streets northeast of where the scene happened on Bourbon Street. So anyway, this location is under investigation by authorities right now. Several streets are blocked off in this neighborhood. Homes have been evacuated. This is after a fire erupted earlier this morning. Neighbors are saying at about 6 o'clock this morning, a fire erupted at a home there. It turns out that this home, investigators are saying, is connected to the New Year's attack. They're saying that the suspect actually rented that home out as an Airbnb and was actually staying there. They have not said how it caught fire or anything like that. You heard a little bit earlier in the news conference, I guess it was from the chief of police. She was saying that they're continuing to walk every block of the French Quarter right now, looking for suspicious packages, looking for every ice chest that they can find, anything that would cause any amount of concern, just making sure that this area is safe. We have not actually seen that yet, but we anticipate that we will very shortly. We're just now coming up on this neighborhood right now. Again, that's the St. Roch neighborhood where they had the fire earlier today.
Wow, so much still to learn, so many questions. Guys, please stay safe out there. Matt and Ryan, thank you so much.
Thanks.
And again, that'll do it for our local coverage as we covered an attack on the world famous Bourbon Street early this morning around 3:15. 10 people killed, 35 people at least injured. The FBI investigating this as an act of terror. We will continue our coverage, though, streaming coverage right now on KHOU 11 Plus with live coverage from our sister station in New Orleans, WWL.